We live in a culture of uncontrolled verbal incivility. You may have noticed the title of the sermon, Handle with Care. What do we handle with care? What? Love? People? Dishes? Well, Mike in the first service had, I think, the best answer. He said fragile things. He said, what do we handle with care? Mike, well, actually, it was Antoine. She whispered it to Mike, and Mike said, fragile things. We handle fragile things with care. Well, we are fragile things. As human beings, we are fragile things. But do we handle one another with care? I say no. As I already said, we live in a culture of uncontrolled verbal incivility. On Friday, Scott Wagner, a candidate for governor in Pennsylvania, posted a rant on Facebook in which he said that he was going to, quote, stomp on Governor Tom Wolf's face with golf cleats. Now, we all know he did not mean that literally. It was figurative. And he was upset over some attack ads that Wolf has been running. But still, you don't say something like that. And just because some of my illustrations are political, this is not a political sermon. It's just some of the best examples of uncivil behavior come from the world of politics. On Thursday in New York City, a Republican headquarters was vandalized. And they left a note or something behind the people who did it. And one of the things they said about themselves is, we are not civil. Well, you got that right. We live in a culture of uncontrolled verbal incivility. We hear it in every political speech we listen to. We hear it in every newscast we watch. We hear it on every reality TV show we watch. We see it in every editorial we read in the newspaper. And yes, for you young folks, some of us old folks still read newspapers. We see it on Facebook. And God forgive us, sometimes we as Christians contribute to it, to the incivility, to not handling other fragile things with care. We used to believe might makes right. Now we say spite makes right. We used to believe in graciousness and victory. Now we believe destroy your opponent at all cost, no matter what it takes, whether it's in a political battle or an issue you're having with your next door neighbor. And we say it is our right to be able to say whatever we want. So we say whatever we want without consideration for who it might hurt or how it might hurt them. We say whatever we want without respect. And we disparage those who disagree with us by simply calling them a name. We say what we want without verification. And when we're proven to be a liar, we either say, well, I never said that, or we say, oh, you took me out of context. We say as Christians what we want without prayer, regardless of how it will reflect on God. And folks, our words reflect on God. So into this terrible reality, and it is a terrible reality. It is not new. I mentioned in the first service, people have never been nice to one another. And again, I'll go back to politics. Abraham Lincoln's time, terrible. Terrible. One of his opponents referred to him consistently as the original ape because of his appearance. We've never been nice to one another, but it's getting worse. And I do think our politicians are leading the way and leading us astray on both sides. But into this terrible mess that we have created, God speaks to us through the book of Proverbs. At least for this morning, it's the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is a wisdom book. And wisdom in the Bible means knowing, understanding, and doing God's will. Okay? It's not knowing a bunch of stuff. It's making godly choices. So knowing God's will means reading the Bible. Understanding God's will means meditating on the Bible. And doing God's will means doing what the Bible tells you to do. And into this mess we have created, God speaks to us. Proverbs 15, verses 1 and 4. And I'm going to be reading from a version of the Bible called The Message. A gentle response diffuses anger, but a sharp tongue kindles a temper fire. Kind words heal and help. Cutting words wound and maim. Now, what a different picture those Proverbs paint of our language. Instead of meeting anger with anger, which that's just like dumping gasoline on a fire, a wise person, a Christian, Christ is the ultimate expression of God's wisdom. A Christian meets anger with gentleness. Instead of trying to harm people with our words, a wise person, a Christian, seeks to help those who have been harmed by the words of others. I want to tell you a story from 1 Samuel 25. And I have a theory about this story and a connection to the Proverbs we read. King David was Solomon's father, right? And as Solomon grew up, no doubt David told Solomon some of the more exciting stories from his life, and this would have counted as one of them. Well, Solomon wrote these Proverbs, and Proverbs take a big truth and distill it down into a little memorable soundbite. And I think, I'm not preaching this as gospel truth, this is just my theory, I think Solomon had the story that I'm about to tell you in mind when he wrote those Proverbs. I think that was the big story from which he distilled these truths, that kind and gentle words bring calm and they bring healing. That's the takeaway from those two Proverbs. Gentle words calm and heal. And I really think David had this story in mind, or Solomon had this story in mind. So it's around 1000 BC, give or take a couple decades in either direction. Saul is still technically the king of Israel, but Saul has disappointed God, and God has withdrawn from Saul. God has already chosen David to be the next king, and Samuel, in fact, has already anointed him, Samuel the prophet. Well, Samuel has died, and all of Israel is in mourning. King David and his men are on the run, or not King David, I keep calling him King David, he's not king yet. King-to-be David and his men are on the run, hiding from Saul. And when we pick up 1 Samuel 25, he and his men are hiding in the desert of Paran. And he's got about 600 men with him. Nearby in Carmel, there's a wealthy man named Nabal. And Nabal has thousands of sheep, thousands of goats. He's a very wealthy man in the area. Now, Nabal is a brute, okay? Uncultured, uncivilized. He does not handle fragile things with care. I didn't study it, but the writer, the text says, after describing him, it simply says, he was a Calebite, as if that should mean something to us. So it's like saying, he was from New Jersey. And you just kind of, they laughed more at that at the first service than you guys did. Nabal had a wife named Abigail, beautiful and intelligent and wise. And in fact, the only thing wrong in her life was her brute of a husband. Well, something we see as you go through the story, it's not really explained anywhere else, but apparently at some point, Nabal's men were out with their sheep, and they were near David and his men. And during that time, David and his men never stole anything from them, and in fact, kind of served as a hedge of protection for these shepherds. And now it's sheep shearing time, which was a festive time. Maybe not for the sheep, but for the people who owned them. A lot of drinking, a lot of eating, a lot of partying. So King David and his men, they're hiding out in the desert, probably don't have the best food to eat. He sends 10 messengers to Nabal. Sends him this wonderfully profuse greeting, and then says, remember, we were with your people in the wilderness, and we never stole anything from them, and in fact, we protected them. And since we are here at such a wonderful festive time, would you please send us whatever you can spare? And there's silence. And Nabal finally says, who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are running away from their masters these days. Why should I give my water and my bread and the meat that I've slaughtered to these men who come from I don't know where? And he sent the servant, or the messengers off. Well, having heard the Proverbs, having read the Proverbs, you can kind of see what's going on. Nabal's harsh response is about to lead to some trouble. It's going to tinder a temper fire in David. So the messengers come back and they tell David, this is what Nabal said. Without thinking, David could be very rash. David said, put on your swords. 400 men grab their weapons. 200 stay behind to guard their possessions. And they head off for vengeance on Nabal. Now, something to keep in mind, this was a warrior culture. And in a warrior culture, you can't let an insult go unpunished. And in this case, when God's people are insulted, God is insulted. So David is doing what is expected of him in his culture. And I kind of had a realization as I was studying this. If you know the Klingons from Star Trek The Next Generation, that's kind of the culture we're talking about. You couldn't let an insult go by. You had to protect your honor. So he sets out and he says, I'm going to kill every man in Nabal's family. One of Abigail's servants, who apparently was with the shepherds out in the desert when David's men were around, went to Abigail and said, I don't know if you know what just happened, but your husband's going to get us in trouble. 10 men have come from David and made a request for food, and you know your husband. He sent them away, and these are good men. They were with us in the desert, and they stole nothing from us. In fact, they protected us. Said, Abigail, you need to do something about this or something bad's going to happen. So Abigail, who's very wise and intelligent, gets together all this food and some servants and puts it on donkeys and says, you go ahead and I'll be after you. And I'll follow you. And she heads out in the direction of David and his 400 men. And they meet in a ravine. One woman, 400 men. They meet. And David is stirring up his men at the time. He's saying, may God deal with me severely if I leave one man from Nabal's family alive. And I want to read to you what Abigail says. And you're going to, if you haven't yet, you're going to see why I think Solomon had this story in mind when he penned those two proverbs, those two little nuggets of wisdom. 11 times in this, Abigail calls David my Lord. 6 times she refers to herself as David's servant. Just some amazing, gentle words here. When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man, Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my lord be given to the men who follow you. This is a wise woman. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed, or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. That is a wise woman. And it's evidence that gentle words are not weakness. One woman, 500 men, and here she is, taking care of a problem created by her husband. Her husband's harsh words kindled a temper fire in David. But the Proverbs tell us that gentle words calm and they heal. And here Abigail's gentle words calm David almost immediately. And he says, it's a good thing you did what you did. David sees God at work in Abigail's words, because he said, if you had not come, none of the men in Nabal's family would be alive by morning. And just as an aside, later in his life, when David says to God, I want to build a temple for you, Do you know what the reason is that God tells David, you're not the one to build a temple for me? He says, your hands have shed too much blood. And so here, Abigail's gentle words calm David and keep him from doing something he would have regretted. She didn't pour fuel on the fire. She brought gentleness into a terrible situation. Well, Abigail goes home, and Nabal, it says, is partying like a king. And she doesn't say anything to him while he's drunk. But the next morning when he's hungover, she tells him what she did. And the text says that Nabal became like a stone. And 10 days later, the Lord struck him dead. God takes care of us. We can let go of our desire for vengeance. We can let go of our desire to prove other people wrong. We can let go of our desire to put people in their place, because if we are in the right, God takes care of us. And that's what happened here when God dealt with Nabal. So Abigail is left, rid of the biggest problem of her life. And the news gets to David that Nabal has died. And he remembers Abigail's words, please remember your servant. And so he sends men back to Abigail with a marriage request. We're here to take you back to David to be his wife. And she accepts. Gentle words calmed King David. Gentle words brought healing to a broken woman. Do you see why I think Solomon had this story in mind when he wrote those Proverbs? I can't prove it, but it is my theory. Now, I seriously doubt the possibility of a literal application of this text happening in this church. I cannot imagine Jason coming to me and saying, this guy in the next town over insulted me, so I want you and Lee and Tim, we're going to go beat him up. I don't see that happening. But you may go home this afternoon and your teenager or your teenage grandchild might yell, I hate you. You might go to work tomorrow and your boss might embarrass you in front of the entire office. Or you may be in school and a teacher might embarrass you in front of the entire classroom. Your neighbor might curse you for running your snowblower at 7 o'clock in the morning. Spouses have been known to say hurtful things to, or rather at, one another. Someone from the other side of the political aisle might insult you. And God forgive us, sometimes a brother or sister in Christ may insult you or assault you, raise their voice, say something that isn't true, accuse you. And I think in these instances, we all want to be good people. We want to respond the right way. But Jesus did not die to make us good. Jesus died to make us gods. And God's people know that a gentle word brings calm. A gentle word calms down a situation. A gentle response diffuses anger, but a sharp tongue kindles a temper fire. That teenager who yells at you, maybe at school they're getting picked on. And if they say anything there, they might get beaten up. So they come home and they take it out on you because they know mom and dad are safe. Mom and dad aren't going to do anything. Grandma and grandpa aren't going to do anything. Maybe that boss who embarrassed you is suffering some real serious financial issues, and that's the only way they know how to deal with it. Maybe that teacher who embarrasses you is dealing with some health problems that nobody knows about, and all that anger is coming from this dark, private place. Maybe your spouse is just worried about the relationship and just doesn't know what to do, and unfortunately it comes out as anger. Maybe your neighbor just came home from work on her second job to support her family, and she just needs some sleep. And again, God forgive us, maybe that Christian brother or sister who speaks to you harshly or angrily got up on the wrong side of the bed. Now, angry, hurting, broken people are responsible for their own actions. I don't deny that. But when you're confronted by one of these people, remember when you were the angry, broken person. Remember how wonderful it felt when you were that person and someone showed gentleness to you. Remember what it feels like to, even as you're saying the words, knowing that you're wrong. Knowing that these words are coming from some angry place. And remember the people who were patient and gentle with you when you did that. Because in God's plan, gentle words heal the broken. Again, the proverb, kind words heal and help, cutting words wound and maim. Our natural response is we want to defend ourselves against angry people, don't we? We want to correct people whom we believe are wrong. We want to fix broken people. But most often the best thing we can do is listen a great deal more than we speak. Carefully choose just a few words and then speak gently. There was a couple, and I'm sorry I cannot remember their name, but a young girl with cerebral palsy. And they went to a doctor in hopes of hearing that she might be able to walk someday. Well, they did all their tests, and the doctor came in, shut the door, didn't even look at him, and said, "Your daughter's never going to walk." Well, the mother was in shock. And she said, "What kind of shoes should I buy her?" She was thinking a special orthotics or shoes attached to a brace. And the doctor, again, without looking, very gruffly said, "It doesn't matter what kind of shoes you buy her. She's never going to use them." So a few months later, they went to another doctor who did the same tests. And when they were alone, the mother asked the doctor, "What kind of shoes should I buy her?" This doctor thought before he spoke. And then he looked at the mother in the eye, and he said, "You should buy her some pretty pink shoes with some purple shoelaces." Now, the parents knew what he meant. He was telling them the exact same thing that the first doctor had. Your daughter is never going to walk. But you tell me, which of those doctors brought calm and healing into a volatile situation? The husband later said, "I can't even tell you what we wanted to do to the first doctor, but we wanted to hug the second doctor." Because the second doctor brought a sense of calm and healing to a family that needed it. Well, in our culture of uncontrolled verbal incivility, as the people of God, as the people saved by Jesus Christ, the ultimate wisdom of God, be those people who bring calm and healing into conversations and arguments and debates. Be those people who listen more than you speak and who weigh your words carefully and then respond gently. Be those people who bring the wisdom of God, Jesus Christ, into every conversation, every debate, every argument that you have. Because those gentle words, especially gentle words about Christ, they bring calm and they bring healing rather than making a situation worse. Amen. I guess on some Sundays you sit here and you listen to a sermon and the application and you think, I have no idea when I'm going to be able to put that to use in my life. I guarantee you, by the end of the day, you're going to have the opportunity to speak a gentle word into an angry or upset situation. You're going to have the opportunity to bring the wisdom of God into a world of uncontrolled verbal incivility. Go out and be those people. Amen. Amen.